All right, everybody, buckle up because we're diving into some serious economic waters. We're talking major tax cuts potentially hitting in 2025.
Yeah.
And that could impact millions and millions of Americans. But here's the catch. We're also dealing with rising inflation tariffs about to go up.
Yeah.
And the Fed kind of hitting the pause button on those interest rate cuts. So is this going to be an economic boom or are we headed for a bust? Well, that's what we're here to explore today. And if you want to stay ahead of the game and understand how all of this could hit your wallet, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any updates.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild time to be looking at the economy. The timing of all this is especially interesting. Like those tariffs on stuff we import from Mexico and Canada, they kick in tomorrow, February 1st, and that adds a whole other layer of complication.
Absolutely. Get ready for more expensive everything. Your morning avocado toast, more expensive. That lumber for your dream deck, you guessed it, more expensive. And hey, speaking of hitting your wallet, let's talk about how these tariffs could impact the cost of, just everyday things. We've mentioned cars already, but it goes way beyond that. Think about your grocery bill. Imported fruits, veggies, even that bottle of beer you like. All those prices could jump. What do you think? How are these tariffs going to affect your spending? Let us know in the comments. And hey, if you're liking this analysis so far, hit that like button.
So here's the thing. Even with the risk of inflation, a lot of economists are actually pushing for these tax cuts to happen right away. Now, to get why, we got to look at what the Fed is doing. They recently decided to stop cutting interest rates for a bit. It's like they're tapping the brakes after lowering them by 25 basis points in their last two meetings.
Okay, so for those of you who aren't exactly finance gurus, basis points might sound a little intimidating, but think of it like this. It's just a way to measure really small changes in interest rates. 1 basis point is 0.01%. So when the Fed cuts rates by 25 basis points, they're basically making it a tiny bit cheaper for businesses and people to borrow money, just 0.25% cheaper.
Exactly. And the reason the Fed is pumping the brakes is they want to see how these tax cuts, tariffs, and all the other economic policies shake out before they decide whether to keep messing with interest rates.
So they're basically playing a high-stakes game of economic chess.
That's actually a perfect way to put it.
Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of these proposed tax cuts. What could they actually mean for you and me? We're talking permanent income tax cuts with the top bracket maybe dropping down to 37%. Corporate tax cuts going from 21% down to 15%. Some people say that could bring jobs back to the U.S. And then there are the cuts that sound pretty sweet at first, like no taxes on tips or overtime pay, and no income tax on Social Security benefits.
Yeah, that's where things get a little complicated. Sure, those tax cuts sound great right now, but we got to think about the long game. Like, getting rid of income tax on Social Security benefits. Yeah, it could put more money in retirees' pockets, but it could also make Social Security's financial problems even worse. Remember, Social Security is already predicted to run out of money in just 9 years.
Yikes. That is not a fun thought. And it's not like everyone's thrilled about these tax cuts. In fact, we've got a clip of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He's got some serious concerns. Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, let's listen.
This is from a recent press conference. He said, we don't know what will happen with tariffs, with immigration, with fiscal policy, and with regulatory policy. I think we need to let those policies be articulated before we can even begin to make a plausible assessment of what their implications for the economy will be.
Yeah.
Okay, so he definitely doesn't sound like he's celebrating these tax cuts. What's behind all this caution?
Well, Powell's basically pointing out the huge amount of uncertainty around how all these big economic policy changes will play out together. He's talking about tariffs, immigration policies, fiscal policy, and regulatory policy. To understand what he's worried about, we need to be clear about what those terms actually mean.
Yeah, let's break it down. Fiscal policy is about how the government uses spending and taxes to steer the economy right.
Exactly. It's like the government's toolbox for managing its money coming in and going out.
Okay, got it. And what about regulatory policy?
Regulatory policy is all about the rules and regulations that the government sets for businesses and industries. Think about things like environmental regulations, workplace safety standards, and laws that protect consumers.
So basically, Powell's saying, hold up, we're throwing a lot of new stuff into the mix here, and we don't really know how it's all going to interact, let alone what it will do to the economy in the long run.
Exactly. He's urging everyone to be careful and pointing out that there could be some unintended consequences.
And he's got a point. Let's face it. The economy is a complex beast. There are a lot of moving parts, and predicting the future as well. It's never easy. But one thing's for sure, we're in for an interesting ride.
Definitely. Buckle up, everybody.
And he's got good reason to be worried, right? Like if we look at some of the economic indicators, they're kind of flashing red. Core inflation, for example, is sitting at 2.8% right now, which is way higher than the Fed's target of 2%.
And you know, the reason the Fed is so focused on keeping inflation under control is because when prices go up too fast, it really messes things up. Your money doesn't buy as much. Your savings lose value. And businesses have a hard time planning for the future. That 2% target is like their way of trying to find a sweet spot where the economy can grow without going completely haywire.
Right, makes sense. But it's not just inflation that's making people nervous. We're also seeing people spend more than they're earning, which could mean they're racking up credit card debt or digging into their savings just to get by.
Yeah, that's a worrying trend. A little spending spree can be good for the economy in the short term, but it's not a sustainable strategy. If people aren't making enough to cover their expenses, it can lead to a mountain of debt, and eventually the whole economy could slow down.
It's like that saying, live fast, die young. But for the economy.
Exactly.
And we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. This is about real people, real jobs, real families struggling to make ends meet. Like there have been reports of the auto industry really hurting because of that threat of a 25% tariff on parts from Canada and Mexico.
Absolutely. And it's not just cars either. Pretty much every industry relies on imported goods to some extent. From construction to agriculture to, the stores we shop at. These tariffs could mean higher prices for everyone.
It really makes you think. Are these tariffs a necessary evil? Like, are they the only way to protect American jobs and businesses? Or are they going to end up hurting the economy more in the long run? What do you think? Hit that like button if you're finding this discussion interesting.
That's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer. Historically, tariffs have been used for all sorts of reasons, sometimes to shield domestic industries from competition abroad, other times as a bargaining chip in trade negotiations.
Right, so some people say tariffs can help level the playing field, create a better environment for American businesses and workers.
Exactly. But the flip side is that tariffs can also make things more expensive for consumers, lead to other countries slapping tariffs on our exports, and just generally disrupt global trade.
So it's a delicate balancing act. Like we're trying to walk a tightrope between protecting our own interests and making sure the global trading system stays healthy.
That's a great analogy.
I try.
We're in uncharted territory here. This combination of tax cuts and tariffs and a Fed that's playing it safe, plus a global economy that's full of uncertainty. It's a complicated situation with a lot of moving pieces, and nobody knows for sure how it's all going to shake out.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around. But if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the economic jargon, don't worry, you're not alone. The important thing is that we're all in this together. And the first step to navigating these choppy economic waters is to stay informed.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about what's driving the economy, the better decisions we can make about our own finances, and the more we can hold our policymakers accountable.
And speaking of staying informed, if you're finding this whole breakdown helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future updates on all things economy. We're going to be here to walk you through all the ups and downs of this economic roller coaster, giving you all the insights and analysis along the way.
We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From the ins and outs of tax cuts and tariffs to the Fed's cautious approach to interest rates. It's definitely a lot to take in. But hopefully you're walking away with a better grasp on these complex economic forces and how they could potentially impact your life.
For sure. But before we wrap things up, I want to emphasize one really important point. It's easy to get lost in all the numbers and jargon. But at the end of the day, economics is really about people.
Absolutely. It's about how these policies affect our everyday lives, our jobs, our ability to afford the things we need, and the future we're building for ourselves and our families.
So as you're listening to this, we encourage you to think about the human side of these economic decisions. How are these policies playing out in your community? Are you seeing the impact of tariffs when you go to the grocery store or fill up your gas tank? Have you felt the effects of inflation on your own budget? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's through these shared experiences and open discussions that we can truly understand the ripple effects of these economic policies and work together to create a more equitable and sustainable economic future for all of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to quickly recap, we dug into the potential impacts of tax cuts, tariffs, and the Fed's careful approach to interest rate changes. We explored the potential pros and cons, the uncertainties, and the human stories at the heart of it all.
And we've encouraged you to think critically, to stay informed, and to engage in these important conversations.
We'll keep tracking all these developments and bring you the latest insights as this economic story unfolds. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you found this discussion helpful, please give it a like and share it with your friends.
It's been great breaking down these complex economic issues with you all.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. Thanks for listening.